You're listening to Move to Brazil with Cece, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this
Let's
is
go.
Courtney with CC in Brazil. So, not with, I am CC in Brazil. I guess I want to talk about. I thought that I was going to do move to Brazil in a chronological order, but things just pop into my head, and I'm always one that's going to follow my intuition and the little nudges like, hold off on that for a second. We need for you to handle this first. So, here I am handling a certain thing, moving to Brazil. So, what's been interesting in being here, probably one of the most interesting things, is that people who have lived all over the world, unlike myself, as I have stated before, Brazil is my first international trip. And but I have lived all over the United States, 10 plus different states and more cities. But this is the first time that I have moved abroad. Yes, I've been to Mexico and I've been to Canada, but that doesn't really count. So I'm going to say this again, and I'm probably going to have to keep saying this disclaimer, is that the reason why I moved to Brazil is not the reason that people assume. People think that I came to Brazil because I was trying to escape the politics of the United States. That's not true. I didn't come for any spirituality. That is not true. I didn't come because of the culture. Those are not the reasons why I chose to come to Brazil. I'll get into that at another time. Tonight, I want to talk about actually being here and meeting other people, like I said, who have lived, not just visited, but lived in different places all over the world. And when they find out that I am in Brazil and I came by myself with no assistance from anyone, not knowing anyone, with the exception of a woman that I met online when I was making pipes, and she is a practitioner here. I called her and said, "Hey, can you and your husband come and pick me up from the airport?" She said, "Yes." That was it. They dropped me off at my Airbnb, and I figured it out from there. I have been here just over a year. And so when people find out, they're just like, oh my God, this place is a level three. Or, oh my God, Brazil is not for beginners. And there's even a man, I believe, on Facebook who has written a book that's called Brazil is Not for Beginners. I can't even begin to get into why people say that because, again, I haven't lived other places. But I will say, when I arrived in my first few months, I mean, to this day, I still say only in Brazil or this place is not for the faint of heart. I intuitively knew there was something different, special, but different about this place. And so I always wanted to speak on it, but I didn't speak on it because, like, how was I going to look talking about this place being special when I didn't have any other international place outside of the United States to compare it to? Now, I've lived in some very interesting places, and each place has been unique and has brought its own joy and challenges and insights and lessons and training and initiations. But this place has a special pizzazz. And when I'm saying that, it's not a bad thing. It just keeps you on your toes where you keep earning your stripes. But now here's the thing, and I have to keep telling people this. I am not your typical American. I am not your typical American by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't mean that in just how I think, but the choices that I've made many years ago, doing things, sacrificing things, taking risks that are now the norm and that people are applauded for. But people wanted to put me in a crazy house for doing it. But also finding myself, and it wasn't even just in rural America. Somehow I put myself in these situations where I'm taking on these larger than life, grandiose tasks because I woke up one day and was like, let me go online and buy a house in Detroit and renovate it by myself. Never have gone to Detroit, things of that nature, right? So I think I'm going to do a separate podcast talking about all the craziness or whatever. And then I think this will give at least the people here in Brazil, the immigrants, expats, and locals, an idea and understanding of, yeah, she truly is. I was called here. Well, it's not the first time, but someone recently called me the Renaissance woman. Yeah, and it's never really intentional. It's just after the fact. I'm like, yeah, I didn't really think this through, but that was a great learning lesson. On to the next. But it's also in my DNA. And so I'm also the same person who didn't realize that $700 was not enough money to live on when I up and decided that I was just going to move to New York. I really thought that $700 was like, I don't even think I thought about it. I was like, I have $700. And how I came about that $700 is the craziest story in itself. So I took the $700, told everyone goodbye, got on a plane, and moved to New York. And where did I land? I was living in, oh, wow, I don't even remember, but ended up finding a roommate. We're still good friends to this day. That was 2013, I believe. And so I have always been that one that has done the odd thing. And then living 4 years in rural America, not having grown up in the country. I grew up in the city. I'm a city girl. I spent summers in the country, but I'm a city girl. And so I think those 4 years kind of prepared me for the things that are normal here that might normally drive someone crazy, unless you have a shit ton of money or a shit ton of patience. Now, this brings me to lying. You may be wondering what lying has to do with this topic. I was talking to someone I know the other day about why I think I get annoyed when I see very surface level conversations about what it's like living in Brazil. You'll see more of the surface level stuff on social media. If you want the really good stuff, I'm going to tell you where you need to go. If you want the really good insider stuff, go to Reddit. Go to the Reddit threads and just start off typing in Brazil. And finding things about Brazil is one of those things that you kind of already have to know what you're looking for before you start looking, because things will come up and you're just like, what the fuck? So when those moments happen, and if you're like me, you're just like, I know I'm not going crazy. I know I'm not the only one. This cannot be normal. But the biggest thing for me is I'm a why person. A lot of people will say, oh, that's just how we are. Oh, that's just how we do it. Or, oh, that's how it's done. Anyone who knows me from the porch as a friend, as a relative, knows that I am the friend, relative, teacher, whatever, who says, but why? Why do you do that thing? Why do you do it that way? Why is it done that way? Most people do not ask why and will just say, oh, they're known to take 3 showers a day, or there's just these little quote unquote cultural things, right? That are kind of habits and conditionings that I'm like, but that makes no sense. Why? And so when I sit and I'm like, okay, there has to be a reason behind this. Another example that I've briefly mentioned before is their hesitancy to say no. I was like, yeah, no, there has to be something deeper to this, or whatever, right? Although I am the person that my mother jokes that says when she was growing up and I would ask, hey, can so and so sleep over? She would say maybe, and it would drive me up a wall. And my response to her maybe would be maybe yes or maybe no. Now to find myself in a country that thrives on maybe, and if you are an immigrant or an expat, I don't get into that argument because I don't really care, because I don't believe in borders. Go find it on my website. I talk about it in a blog post on one of my websites, either way. But I find myself surrounded by people who use maybe, and they use maybe even though they really actually mean no, but they will say yes. But yes does not guarantee that it's confirmed and that it's going to actually happen. You're looking at a 50% chance of it going either way. And you won't know until the time comes and goes. And so as an American, someone born in America, in the United States, and if you're listening to this, you know that we are pretty much yes or no. This doesn't have anything to do with politics, race, or anything. We are just more direct. Of course, not everyone. And that is another thing that is so difficult to talk about certain things like this, because even though I'm speaking, or even someone else speaking generally, we don't want to always stop and say, yes, I know not everyone, but I'm going to say that, yes, I know not everyone. Some people in America also have a tendency not to want to say no. We call those people pleasers. And so that's not what I'm talking about. But if you go to Reddit and you start to say, okay, what is this with this maybe thing and canceling of plans and what we would call wishy-washy is just kind of a cultural thing. I sat back one day in total frustration and I was like, look, there has to be a reason for this. And so when I sat and just tapped into my intuition around it and then started digging, I was like, oh, and started finding some articles and journals and just where that came from. But also when one looks at the unfortunate history of enslavement and colonization that occurred here and is still present in a way, and I don't mean in a way that has anything to do with racism. It's just more a reminder and in your face. I will get into that another time, but that's going to literally take me some time to sit down and go into talking points so that way I don't get upset and get off track. So anyway, back to the word no and not knowing and certain things, right? So when people keep the conversation surface level, and if someone is making the decision to come to Brazil and have a long-term experience, not just on a couple of day vacation or even a couple of weeks vacation, but is considering moving here and then makes the move here and starts to notice certain things based off of the surface level conversations, and you don't have a shit ton of money, you don't have a built-in support system, this I would say is not necessarily a place for someone that has high anxiety. I would say that it's not a place for someone who requires substances, legal or illegal, to cope. I would say there are exceptions to that. Obviously, there are people here who deal with anxiety. I actually was reading something not too long ago about Brazil being rated by the WHO organization, the WHO, right? Who, as having the highest, the citizens have the highest level of anxiety of like any other country, like up there or whatever, right? There's reasons for this. But also then imagine being an immigrant and then arriving and then being thrust into that, not knowing the language and not knowing just where things are, how things work. And it can just be a lot. Because I am a high risk, I thrive in high stress situations. I'll spaz out for 2 to 3 minutes, but I don't like being boxed in. I don't like feeling trapped. I don't like being depressed. I don't like feeling stressed. So when any of those feelings come up for me, I then go into defensive strategy mode. I don't shut down. I do the opposite. I then become high alert and go hard on trying to figure out how to get out of that situation. I've had some of my biggest breakthroughs and aha moments and inventions and launches in high stress moments or spans of my life where I was just like, oh yeah, hell no, fuck this. And if I'm dealing with it, then once I figure out how to get out of this situation or to prevent this situation, I'm going to package it and either teach it or sell it to other people, because we're never alone. We're never the only one. And most people don't think that, oh, I'm always going to make lemonade out of lemons. So the line, some people will lie about why they arrived, why they came, and how they were able to maneuver while they were here. I didn't come to Brazil with a support team, network, or knowing anyone. Same as when I moved to New York. I have enough faith and trust in myself and enough pattern recognition in my capabilities and God, ancestors, and all of the things to know I'm going to figure this shit out. And not everyone has done that. I have had people who have gone to another place or lived in another place outside of the United States and try to compare Brazil to that place. And I'm just like, yeah, you don't understand. It's different. Even people who have been to the place that you have been to have said that it's different. And lo and behold, the people that didn't show up, who thought this was going to be the same rodeo as the other rodeo in another country, realized, yeah, no, this is different. But still, they had a different experience, because if they were connected to me, then I provided them with, okay, from the time you get on the plane, when you get here, expect this, plan for this. When you get here, plan for this, go to this store. I've tried these different products. This one sucks, that one works, right down to spending a small fortune on dishwashing liquid and trying to find one that was going to satisfy what I need to get done. Those are two totally different experiences. Someone like me, as opposed to someone who has had their hand held the whole time. There are many immigrants, expats that I know from the United States and other places who came just like I did and have been here much longer than I have, who didn't have anyone hold their hand, no guidebook, no, you can call me in an emergency. When you have a breakdown, you need help finding a place, you need a contact, this is who you can talk to. There are many of us who went that route. But then there are some, again, who had their hand held. If you are taking advice from someone on making the transition and they are offering you suggestions and advice, ask them a simple question. Who helped you and how much did they help you? And then make the decision on who you are going to work with. Because anyone can romanticize this place if they had assistance. Despite all of the frustrations and whatever, I would still recommend Brazil to anyone, especially Black Americans, to come and visit. Again, I will get into the reasons why it's not what people think on another show. But for right now, you have to decide on your personality type and what works for you. Some of you may be listening to this who's like me. I'm just going to hit the ground running. Some of you may need your handheld, and that is okay. However, do you have the resources it's going to take to pay the person to continuously hold your hand? Because I promise you, there's going to always be something that's going to come up that's going to be outside the package or their hours of availability. And if you know that you can't pivot and think quickly, you might want to rethink on who you're getting advice from. And is that person equipped enough to assist you in those moments where you're just like, yo, I really need to figure some shit out right now. Are they going to be able to reach into their bag and refer you to someone, but also who referred the person to them that they are now referring to you? Or was it through actual learned lesson, right? In closing, I will say, I, for one, have never been that person that wanted to do the touristy type of thing. I, for one, came to Brazil with the intention and said, I don't want to know any expats or immigrants. That's not what I'm coming for. I've always immersed myself in the culture, the place, the neighborhood, the people. After arriving here, I bumped into someone who then introduced me to the expat group and the immigrants, whatever they call themselves or whatever. But I am also that same person who was just like, yo, I'm about to move to the Campo, the countryside, because I needed greenery. Didn't think it through. I mean, it paid off, but now looking back, I'm like, yo, I don't even know the language. I was just in this small town by myself figuring this shit out, met a bunch of locals and had a fabulous experience. Many people who have still been here many years do not have that same experience. You will find many who have been here for quite a few years, who have a lot of friends. They speak the language fluently. They have lived in different neighborhoods, whether someone wants to call them good neighborhoods where the immigrants and the tourists go, or the quote unquote bad neighborhoods, which is, the hood. But it's still urban. It's still city. And I have not yet met, with the exception of, and not face to face, just over chat, I have not met many, with the exception of two, who have made the conscientious decision to let me go to the countryside. Let me meet, like the cool, slow, laid back people. But that's it for right now. Just know who you're dealing with. Are they telling you the truth about their experience, or are they glossing it over for clout to make it seem like it was doable for them, and now trying to make it seem like it's doable for you?